Gridiron Grinder! Hut hut hike!
All right, we're rolling. It is Gridiron Grinder time. I'm Ryan. With me, as always, my buddy James. Just a couple of dudes hanging out, talking about what's going on in the NFL each week. This is episode 153 of Gridiron Grinder. And for tonight, we're going to kick things off with Name That Stadium like we always do. Then we're going to cover the news from this past week. After that, we are going to provide our AFC and NFC South Outlook for the upcoming season. And last but not least, we'll close things off with question of the week. And so, yeah, with all that being said, how's it going tonight, James?
It's going good. How's it going with you?
Pretty good, man. I got to say, I'm totally fired up about all of our new subscriber action that we've had. And so last week we got to shout out to a couple of new guys. This week we had 6 new subscribers. 5 of them were anonymous, but Silver Dragon, you let us know who you are. We appreciate you signing up to watch us, and hopefully you like what you're going to get here tonight. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, we're pushing that half century mark. Let's call it like it is. Like we're getting up there, not quite to the half century mark.
Yeah.
Far enough over the quarter century to
I'd like to say 32% of the way to triple digits.
Yes, exactly.
Whatever way you can spin it to make it sound, I don't know, a little spicier. But yeah, I mean, hey, on that note, for anybody who's watching, just to give you a heads up, these episodes do get a little bit lengthy. We typically run an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so because of that, we bookmark each section of the video in the description of the video. And that way, if you want to jump around to a particular section, it's easy to kind of navigate from there. And so that can kind of help you for those purposes. And yeah, I guess, James, why don't you take that ball and run with it for Name That Stadium, man?
So as you can see, I'm traveling around, going to stadiums that host NFL games. First person to guess it gets an extra special bookmarked shout out, and even somebody that guesses probably will get just a normal shout out because we want y'all to play this, but nobody's been taking it lately. Last week I was at the Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton because we were doing our show during the Hall of Fame game, so I figured, hey, it just kind of fit.
Yeah, no, very appropriate. I like that.
I would like to point out, I think that was the second time since we've been doing this that I've gone to the Hall of Fame Stadium. So these they tend to repeat because there's kind of a limited number of stadiums that I can pick from.
Yeah, especially this time of year. So yeah, for any of those long time subscribers or viewers, if you do want to play Name That Stadium, James is just giving you some hints here on what to look for in the future. So,
yeah, definitely.
All right, well, cool. Let's move on and do our recap of the past week. And so, James, I kind of thought it was going to be a light week since we did our last show less than a week ago, but it ended up being fairly busy. And so some of this stuff I'm not going to go too deep into, just kind of hit the highlights and move on. And speaking of the Hall of Fame game, we could just start there. The first preseason game, not usually a ton to go crazy with in terms of the score and things like that because it's a lot of backups. But the one takeaway that I had, which I think most people that watched it or read about it or whatever after the fact would agree with, is that Cleveland's backup quarterback, Dorian Thompson Robinson, the dude looked really, really good. Keep in mind it was against a bunch of backups, but still, as a rookie quarterback in the league, he came in, he showed a lot of intensity, a lot of competitive ability, and he's a guy to keep an eye on for them. And we kind of talked about it back when they had the draft, that I liked the fit for him backing up
Mm-hmm.
Deshaun Watson. I think that they're maybe cut from the same kind of cloth, and so I wouldn't be surprised if he snags that QB2 job sooner than later.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I was looking at it, and he's just that natural fit there for to back up Watson. And what you want is your QB2 to have a similar skill set as your QB, because then your backup, if something happens to your starter, your backup can just slide in and you don't have to change the offense much. But a lot of teams, especially with the running quarterbacks, aren't able to find that other Russian quarterback that can back up, because there's not that many of them currently in the league.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you want to have that consistency for sure. All right, so next up, James, I noticed that Kareem Hunt has had some interest as a free agent running back. He had a visit with the Saints and another visit with the Colts. Nothing has basically transpired yet for him, which I'm kind of surprised about. He's a very well-rounded running back, and when you look at his time in the league, you'd think he would still have some tread on those tires, so to speak. And there's been a lot of running back drama, and these two teams, they pointed out Kamara with the suspension, Jonathan Taylor with the possible, holdout or demanding a trade or whatever.
Well, Jonathan Taylor's on the PUP list. They put him on the non-football injury list initially
Okay.
for alleged back spasms. That Jonathan Taylor's like, I didn't have back spasms. I didn't complain about back problems. And
Oh,
then
okay.
now I guess he tweaked his ankle in camp or something, so they put him on the PUP list.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, hey, in either case, I would have thought Kareem Hunt would have been getting more looks by now, but
Hmm.
that's okay. It is what it is. Another running back that has gotten a look is Kenyon Drake. He has signed with Indy, and so he's going to be part of the insurance policy, at least for the Jonathan Taylor situation. I don't know how much Kenyon Drake has left in the tank. I would have personally preferred, obviously, a guy like Kareem Hunt, but um, that's okay. Drake has had his ups and downs in his time, and so you're looking at basically filling a void for some big shoes with Jonathan Taylor. I think anybody you bring in is going to have a hard time filling that role. So
Yeah, and when you mentioned Kareem Hunt, did you mention that he visited New Orleans too this week?
yes.
I completely zoned out on that. I'm sorry. I've had a week.
Oh, okay.
Forgive me.
Yeah. No, it's all good.
I just
Yeah.
saw it and it clicked. I was like, I didn't hear him say that.
Yeah.
So I try to pay attention, but every once in a while, I'm going on like 10 days in a row without a weekend or without a day off, and as us government employees, that's a lot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I get it. Hey, it's all good, man. I'll probably space out at some point here too. So that's why teamwork makes the dream work for Gridiron Grinder. All right. So next up, James, I saw former Lions defensive end and Miami Dolphins defensive end Trey Flowers. He has re-signed with the Patriots, which is where he began his career. Um, I think that was a great move for him. I think it's a great move for the Patriots. He was highly productive for them, and he didn't seem to fit in with us or with the Dolphins. And so, sort of sending him back home, maybe that'll kind of like resurge his career and get him going again. But it's one of those situations. It's like Jamie Collins and all these other guys, Kyle Van Noy. You got to watch those guys when they leave the Patriots because Belichick's
Hmm.
very good at getting them to fit into a very specific role in a defense. And we've seen a lot of those guys get big money deals elsewhere, and it just never pans out. So I think good for him. Just be cautious if and when that contract's up again. So,
Yeah.
and then I saw Teddy Bridgewater. He signed a deal with Detroit, 1 year contract. He's going to be backing up Jared Goff. Makes sense. Dan Campbell already said Hendon Hooker's going to have a redshirt year. And so I think at this point in the season or off season or whatever, Bridgewater probably thought, hey, the chance to start's not likely there unless a starting quarterback gets hurt somewhere. And so this is a pretty, I would say, attractive backup quarterback job.
Hmm.
If Goff does get hurt, he's on a team that has that potential playoff hype. And so, and I'm glad to have him. I heard we tried signing him before the draft, and he wanted to wait and see what we did in the draft, and then this whole time he's been holding out for a better opportunity. It just didn't come his way.
Yeah.
Another guy going back home, so to speak, we got John Johnson, the safety who was playing in Cleveland these last couple years. He is returning to the Rams, and so if you go back a couple seasons, he was really good in that Rams defense. Got a big money deal in Cleveland. I wouldn't say he was horrible in Cleveland, but he just never lived up to the contract and the expectations that they had for him. And the Rams, we know they need help. So if he can get back to the form that he had with them, that'll be a huge boost for that defense.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we got Justin Houston, getting a little long in the tooth, but he has signed a 1 year deal with Carolina. And man, I tell you, James, when I was going through this and I was looking at where he would fit in on that defense, because we know Carolina's defense has some talent, um, it just made me think, wow, it's really a really good roster in Carolina, and not just on defense, on offense. I think that a lot of their success is going to depend on what happens with Bryce Young and how quickly he develops. But we're going to be talking about some of that tonight, so we'll save that for later. Next up, Benjamin, running back for the New Orleans Saints. He has ruptured his Achilles. Bummer for him, because it looked like he was in line to get more work with Kamara being suspended. Also, kind of another reason I'm surprised they didn't try to make a move on Kareem Hunt. They brought him in,
Mm-hmm.
but it is what it is. And yeah, I guess important to point that out. So I don't think we talked about the suspension last week, just that it was likely something was going to happen, right? Or did we hit it
I don't think we even hit. It was likely. He was meeting. I think last week when we recorded, he was meeting with the
with
commissioner
Goodell?
that day or
Okay, yeah.
something. Or it was the next day. It was announced he was meeting with the commissioner. So I don't even think we hit it at all.
Okay, yeah. So I couldn't find it in my notes, but yeah. So Alvin Kamara, he had what was the incident? Like some type of assault deal or
It
something?
was a fight in Vegas after the Pro Bowl or Pro Bowl weekend, and him and a couple of his buddies got into a fight
Got
with
into a brawl.
somebody, and he was facing some serious charges, and then he he
Yeah, it got
pled
reduced or
guilty
whatever.
to a misdemeanor of
Yeah,
disturbing the
disturbing the
peace or
peace or
something.
something. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So hey, they decided they're going to do 3 games for him, which you know, um, probably not that bad in the grand scheme of things. And I think when you're looking at the Saints and their prospects for this year, I think 3 games helps them quite a bit. That it wasn't more, because with them bringing in Derek Carr, I think a lot of people have some high hopes for the Saints this year, and
Hmm.
so yeah, I think 3 games could be manageable for them. But okay, next up we've got defensive end Yannick Ngakoue. He has signed a 1 year deal with the Chicago Bears. When I went through it, I didn't see the details, but I thought I heard on NFL Network it was something around 1 year, 10 million. So
Hmm. I
um,
think that's what I heard too. I don't recall though.
okay, and 10. I mean that's pretty healthy for a guy that I think a lot of people were starting to regard him as like a pass rush only kind of specialist. But I think the Bears are saying they're expecting him to be on the field a lot. And so, that kind of money would reflect a more active role than just a specialist kind of role. So, um, let's see. Next up, I got Matthew Judon, the outside linebacker for the Patriots. He has restructured his contract for this year, basically just boosting his guaranteed money. I think it was something around 2 million guaranteed. The restructured deal boosts him up to 14, and probably just a little bit of salary cap finesse on the Patriots and making him happy on his part of the process. So good for him.
Hmm.
Next up, this one I like, and I think it's a freaking steal, to be honest. But Cincinnati extended their linebacker Logan Wilson 4 years, 37.25 million, for how good he has been and how much these pay rates have been inflated. I don't know, man. For less than 10 million a year on this guy, just blows my mind. But hey, it's still a lot of money. Good for him. really good for the team, and I think it helps, with like sort of keeping that Cincinnati Super Bowl window open. If you can get these guys a little bit early and get them for the right value, and it helps you, financially keep all your studs. So, good move there.
Yeah. So I looked it up. Ngakwe, it was 10 million guaranteed, but with incentives, it could be 10.5.
Okay. Hey, not a whole lot of escalators, but that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, I got a few more here, James. It looks like Malik Hooker, the safety for Dallas, he signed a 3-year, $24 million extension. Mercedes Lewis, also one of these guys getting really long in the tooth, but still a phenomenal blocking tight end. He signed with the Chicago Bears. I didn't see the details on his, but that's okay. And then lastly, I got Cameron Jordan from the Saints. He signed a 2-year extension worth $27.5 million.
Hmm.
So that's all I've got, man. Quite a bit there for less than a week of time. But what'd you see that I missed, man?
So one, and it happened about 3 hours ago, so I'm not surprised you missed because Marlon Mack tore his left Achilles and is out for the season
Hmm.
in practice today.
Man, that guy just can never catch a break.
Yeah, so I guess it was 2020 he tore his right Achilles, and now this year he tore his left Achilles.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to his time in Indy, it just seems like every chance he got hurt, and
Hmm.
and then he just got buried in a depth chart somewhere. And so, and now
Yeah,
you got to wonder at this stage of his career for a running back with this many injuries, can he bounce back and ever really be productive? I don't know, but obviously I hope the best for the guy. He had a ton of talent. He had a ton of, he was one of those guys. He was like a boomer bust running back when he
hmm,
was playing in Indianapolis, and he was always in a backup role. And then it looked like he was ready to start, and he got hurt. And so, just an unfortunate set of circumstances for him.
yeah. And the other thing is this report just came out like an hour ago, but apparently Bashad Breeland was arrested in North Carolina. Um, this news broke, but earlier this week, with charges including possession of a stolen car, guns and drugs in the car. Um, I'm looking for like the full rundown of it.
Okay.
Here it is. Possession of a stolen vehicle, altering serial numbers, altering a title, possession of marijuana, possession of a Schedule 1 controlled substance, and possession of a firearm. He had, according to the police report, he had multiple guns in the car, including two AR-15s and two AK-47s. He had more than 5 pounds of marijuana, 62 grams of suspected mushrooms, and drug paraphernalia.
Holy cow, man. Uh, and you would wonder why. Why would a person in his position do something like that? It just seems like he would
Yeah,
never have to go to the streets, you know?
yeah. So apparently, this is there was an incident 2 years ago. I completely forgot about this. Um, but in 2020 or 3 years ago, where he was charged with 5 counts: resisting arrest, transport of alcohol in a motor vehicle with a broken seal, open container, and 28 grams or less of marijuana or 10 grams of hash, and driving without a license.
Okay.
So this is a very similar incident that's happened to him.
Yeah, I'd say this is escalating it quite a bit
Yeah,
when you
exactly.
start tampering with serial numbers on cars and things like that. So, well, shit, that's not good. That doesn't bode well for him.
Yeah, and then apparently on the first depth chart that the Raiders released, they put Zamir White as the starter.
Okay, yeah, because Josh Jacobs is holding out.
Yeah, and there's like not even talks between Jacobs and the Raiders right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I thought I just saw something earlier that the Raiders want to re-engage him for discussions, but it doesn't
Yeah,
mean it's going to happen.
exactly. They are open to restarting
Okay,
contract
that's what it was.
talks
Yeah,
with him.
they are open to it.
Yeah.
Uh, okay. Well, is that it on the news?
Yeah, I think that was it. I want to hit that Josh Jacobs thing because that's a crazy one that like I'm surprised the Raiders haven't tied that up
I know he
somehow.
was a huge part of their success last year.
Yeah, that, something to look forward to. Apparently today Claypool with the Bears pulled up grabbing his hamstring during one-on-one reps. So, but there's
Okay,
nothing on how injured he is.
gotcha. Okay, yeah, that's one to keep an eye on. Um, with them bringing in DJ Moore, they still have Darnell Mooney, and then at tight end they got Cole Kmet and Robert Tanyan. Claypool, man, it would help to have him, but it's not the end of the world because they
Hmm.
definitely got some weapons they're receiving now. But still, you want to see him be up to form, and you want to see how they're going to look with the full slate of guys. So
Yeah, and
um,
to close the loop on something we talked about a lot a couple years ago, um, Henry Ruggs was sentenced for his fatal DUI crash
oh
from
yeah,
2021.
going like 100 and something miles an hour or whatever.
Yeah, he was going 156 miles an hour while drunk. He was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison.
Okay, yeah, that was I don't know, just not a good situation. So
Yeah, but just closing the loop on that because
yeah, yeah, yeah. So he is out of the league. He is
well,
out.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, he's definitely out.
yeah. Okay. Well, let's move it on
Oh,
over and let's
wait,
do
wait, wait, wait,
our.
wait, wait.
Oh, not yet.
Kareem Hunt was offered a contract.
Oh, he denied it or what?
Yeah,
Wow. With which team? The
uh,
Saints or the Colts?
the Colts offered him a contract, but he didn't sign it.
Oh man.
There's
Huh.
no information on what
Yeah.
the
Was it
contract
decent or what?
was
Yeah,
or
we don't know.
anything, but let me see. So, according to Tom Pelissero, I want to see if there's any information on what he was signed. If it was,
Yeah, I mean, hey, you were just talking about Josh Jacobs.
yeah,
The Raiders should be kicking the tires on Kareem Hunt too. Any of these guys that have a running back issue at all, or even if you just need the depth, man, you should be going after a guy like Kareem Hunt.
yeah. So I guess it's just he was. The, all the information is they offered him a contract. What that contract was, who knows?
Okay, I gotcha. That's fine.
So, so that's good that they offered him a contract. So it's they probably just lowballed him because we heard what Jim Irsay said about running backs a couple like last week. So
Yeah, that could be. All right, are we good now?
that's it. That's it.
Sweet. Cool, cool, cool.
I just happened to see out of the corner of my eye that Hunt was actually offered a contract.
No, hey, good to have the information for sure. All right, so yeah, let's move it on over. We're going to do our AFC and NFC South outlook for the upcoming season. And so this is just carrying it forward from last week. We did our review on the teams of the East. This week we're doing the South. Next week we're doing the West. And then we're going to wrap it all up with the North. And so looking at the South here, James, we'll start with the AFC, which gives us the Houston Texans. And so I'll just start off like I did last week and hit some of the key, like player transactions or roster moves, if you will. And then we can kind of talk about what do we think that means in terms of their record predictions and things like that for this year. And so, For Houston, at quarterback, the big thing was that they drafted C.J. Stroud in the first round, and they still have Davis Mills, but the expectation is that Stroud's going to win that QB1 job, even though he hasn't been given it yet. At running back, they lost a couple guys, nothing crazy. They did bring in Devin Singletary, um, but Damian Pierce is the guy there, and I want to say Singletary got hurt. Maybe I'm mistaken that, but
Yeah, he
um,
did.
okay.
If I want to say that too.
Yeah, I think it was a few weeks ago though,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, maybe you could check that out while I'm doing our recap here. At wide receiver, they did lose Brandon Cooks. He went to the Cowboys, and you know their plan to backfill him. We'll see how it plays out. But they brought in Robert Woods, who coming off an injury last year had a really down year with Tennessee. They did also draft Tank Dell in the third round, but I think that they're expecting some of the guys that were already on the roster, like Nico Collins, and then even John Mechie, who's coming back from cancer. They're expecting some of those guys to step up at wide receiver, and I'm hoping that's the case because we've talked about it before. When you draft a rookie quarterback, you really want him to have weapons to kind of help aid in that development.
Yeah, so I glanced at a quick search and I'm not seeing any recent
Okay.
injury history with Singletary, so maybe it was just like he tweaked something.
That could be. And yeah, I mean, hey, if he's healthy, that's good because he'll be a really good running back to Damian Pierce. And so then at tight end, the big news there was that they brought in Dalton Schultz in free agency. And I really do like that one because we talk a lot about tight ends, rookie quarterback or young quarterback's best friend. And so Dalton Schultz, he was recovering or coming back from injury last year with Dallas, sort of a down year by his standards. But I'm hopeful that he'll be able to get back to form and provide a lot of value for these guys. Then looking at the offensive line, they did lose a couple guys, Justin Britt, AJ Cann, but they also brought in Shaq Mason. That was a nice
Hmm.
signing. And they drafted Juice Scruggs in the second round. And I think you were saying their starting center got hurt. And so it looks like
Yeah,
Scruggs,
Quisenberry.
yeah, so thank you, Quisbury. Yeah, so Scruggs might get pushed into a starting role sooner than later. On the defensive line, Mario Addison's out. They brought in Sheldon Rankins. I think that's an okay upgrade. Like that's Rankins has like a 5 point boost over Addison if you look at lineups. And then at the edge, they lost Rasheem Green and Ogbania Okoronkwo, however you say his name. But the key here is that they doubled down early in the first round of the draft, and this is where they brought in Will Anderson Jr. And so they're expecting him to have an impact in his rookie year. Of course, you got to temper those expectations, but I think the idea is that long term that should be a major upgrade to their edge. And then at linebacker, I like they brought in Denzel Perryman. I like him a lot. He's highly productive. I know he's sometimes a liability in coverage, but um, you know he's a pretty good linebacker, especially a guy you're going to find in free agency. They also brought in Corey Littleton to add some depth. At safety, I'm sorry, at cornerback they added Tavir Thomas, which helps. It's not like a spectacular signing, but it'll help them. But I think one of their flash signings was bringing in Jimmy Ward at safety, and so that was D'Amico Ryan's connection from the 49ers got him in there. And when I go up to down looking on lineups at each of the position groups, James, I would say that in terms of needs for the team, it's like quarterback's not really a need, but it needs development. Like they have Stroud and they're expecting him to be the franchise guy. But as a rookie, he's going to need time. And so until he gets up to speed, that could be a weak spot for him. That wide receiver one spot could be a weak spot for him. They do have plenty of guys in that wide receiver room. We just need to see one of them step up. Scruggs at center, that could potentially be an issue. But I think offensive linemen typically get there quicker, and so I think Scruggs will be okay. But then also on the interior defensive line, at defensive tackle, I think they could use some help there. But all in all, when you look at where Houston was a year ago to where they're at today, it's like night and day. They've made a ton of progression. And so I like what I'm seeing. But they still got a ways to go. So I don't want to like totally sugarcoat it. What are you seeing there, bud?
Well, the South is the worst division in all of football by my estimation.
Okay.
Uh,
So that helps them.
That helps them, but how much does it help them is my question. I'm going to be frank with you. With Houston, I have nobody. Or I'm sorry, with the South, I don't have a single team above 500. That's how bad I think this division is. And I'm really high on Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence too.
Well, yeah, and so I guess just looking at that in our super early, you had Houston at 7-10. How are you feeling about them now?
I think. Let me get to my. So I dropped Houston down 2 games.
Okay.
And I put them at 5-12. Like Quisenberry, with a rookie quarterback, you need that anchor on your offensive line, and I dropped them back with the Quisenberry injury because I have concerns about Scruggs stepping in and being the starter day one at center there. I don't think I like what they did in the draft. I really, really do. I think there's pieces that they need to help.
Stroud?
Yeah, Stroud. Thank you. I was like, it's not Young, it's the other one, and I was just like drawing a blank on his name.
Okay.
Plus, on top of that, they have a very hard in-conference schedule because they have to play the AFC North.
Okay.
And they play.
Yeah, the AFC North is fucking brutal.
Yeah, so they play the NFC South, which is where they get a lot of, I think they get a lot of their wins. But that North, they have to, and they start the year off at Baltimore.
Okay.
And they're at Baltimore and at Cincinnati, and they have Cleveland and why am I drawing a blank? Pittsburgh at home.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's a tough slate of teams to have to play.
Yeah. But just playing the 2 best teams, the teams in my estimation who are the, which we'll get into in 2 weeks, the best teams in the AFC North, their hardest games are on the road.
Okay.
For that, and they also all their hard games, like with the exception of New Orleans, like they play at Atlanta, which I think is going to be a really good team, and we'll talk about them in a little bit later. They play at the Jets, who, by my estimation, is going to be improved.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a schedule that's very conducive to C.J. Stroud having a good year, and I think that offense goes as C.J. Stroud goes. So it's just.
Yeah, and hey, they're starting from the bottom, so it's. I think that even if they went 5-12. I think it's a move in the right direction. They were 3-13-1 last year, and so 5-12 with Stroud getting quality reps, I think would be encouraging for them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and that's it's going to be a building process for them. And I at 5-12, I don't have them in as the worst team in their division.
Okay.
So that's a plus. They're the 3rd best in their division now, so they're moving up in the right direction. I really think D'Amico Ryans can turn this team around, but I just don't think this is the year to really do that.
He's getting some really strong vibes. People are really digging what he's doing down there. And that's good, man. I've got him at 4-13, and so that's actually the same as where I had him in the super early. Not a whole lot changed in my model for these guys, and so I think at 4-13, 5-12, you and I are pretty well aligned on these guys right now at this time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, well, why don't we move on down? The next team on my list here is the Indianapolis Colts, and so for the Colts at quarterback. They said goodbye to Matt Ryan, who was really just ineffective with them, and they brought in Gardner Minshew, but he's really just a placeholder for Anthony Richardson, who they drafted in the first round. Ton of potential, but very raw, and so we'll see how long it takes for him to get going. At running back, this is one move that I want to mention, even though lineups has this guy rated as a 68. They did bring in Darrington Evans, who I think is one of these guys that is just underrated and has some potential. And so, with the issues that they're having in the running back room, I don't think that it's like bare. It just they've got to like put these guys in a position to succeed. And some of that's going to come down to their offensive line, which played horrible last year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, looking at the edge, they lost Yannick Ngakoue. We talked about him earlier, signing with the Bears. They brought in Samson Ebukam, which was not a bad signing. Um, and I think lineups has him a little underrated too. They've got him at a 75. They had Ngakoue at an 85, which I think you could tighten that gap between those two guys. I don't know that it needs to be that big of a spread. They also lost Bobby Okurik, however you say his name. I know I always mess his up. At linebacker, I think that is an issue. They didn't really backfill for him. Um, the expectation is Shaq Leonard's going to be healthy and ready to go, but you still want to have more than one quality linebacker on the defense. Then at cornerback, Stephon Gilmore is no longer with them. He went to Dallas. They did draft Julius Brents in the second round. I liked his scouting report, but as a rookie, you got to kind of temper your expectations there. And then let's see, safety. They lost Rodney McLeod. They didn't really backfill him with, anybody with a respectable rating or a higher draft pick. And then at kicker, Chase McLaughlin, he's out. They brought in Matt Gay. And so, looking at the Colts and just some of their weak spots in general, I think at quarterback, it's similar to Houston, where they have their quarterback of the future. He's just going to need time to develop, and he's probably going to need more time than Stroud. And so until he gets there, that's going to be a weak spot for them. Running back, it's all going to depend on what happens with Jonathan Taylor. If he sticks around and they find a way to keep him happy, they're fine at running back. If they end up trading him or he holds out, running back becomes a weak spot for them big time, especially with the unknown status of their offensive line. Tight end is another area of concern for them. And so when I look at like lineups, some of these positions I want to see, somebody at least 75 or 80. They don't have that. With a rookie quarterback, I would prefer to see the tight end at an 80 or above because, like we talk about, we want that quarterback comfortable with the tight end relationship there. Outside linebacker, I think they need help. And at safety, I think they need help. And so the Colts, for a team that just a couple years ago had all these high playoff hopes, um, they're looking pretty run down, man. And they're looking like they got a lot of holes at this point, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. So with the thing with the Colts, like the league, this is kind of a weird, quirky schedule in the league. Like they have 4 of their 6 division games in the first 6 weeks.
Okay.
They play Jacksonville, Houston, then they play at Baltimore, the Rams, Tennessee, and then at Jacksonville. So, like that's kind of weird. And then like they don't play again in the division until week 13.
Gotcha.
But looking at like the opening before their bye, I could see them easily going 0-10 going into being 0-10 going into the bye.
Oh, I'm with you. I could see
Because
that
it's
too. Yeah.
like there's a couple question mark games, the Rams, the Saints, and at Carolina and at New England. So those 4 games are games that they in theory could win, but the other games, I mean, they have their division games. They play, and outside of that, they play at Baltimore and Cleveland at home.
Okay.
So that, I mean, like, that's just a tough start to a season. Like, I could easily see, looking at their schedule and how it's lining up and what I'm hearing out of the Colts, this team could, in theory, be 0-17, 1-16. Like,
It could
seriously.
it could be rough. Yeah, it could be rough.
This
And
could be a
so
rough year.
yeah, and so all right. So last year they finished 4-12-1. Obviously, a lot has been shaken up with this team. New coach, new quarterback, yada yada yada. Yeah, I guess I didn't talk about that much, but the coach situation they made big change there. Um, you had them at 4-13, and you're super early. Where do you have them at now?
I have them winning 3 games this
Okay.
year. I really because like there are a couple teams that I'm not sure about. Like, and we'll get to some of them later. Like, have them probably beating the Rams and probably beating Carolina.
Okay.
And I mean, then it's just like a crapshoot, and I think they're going to kind of luck into a win somewhere
Yeah,
along the
usually do
way.
that.
But
Yeah, especially at the end of the year, you got a rookie head coach. The team
mhm,
kind of rallies behind him at the end, and they squeeze a few off that aren't expected. So I got you. Yeah, and that's fine. So yeah, you had them originally 4-13. You dropped them down a game, so you're 3-14. I originally had them at 2-15, and my model now has them at 1-16. And so you
mhm.
were talking about that 0-17, 1-16 possibility. That's where I have them. And I think that, like you're saying, somewhere in there, they're going to sneak a couple wins. And, I don't know where they're at. And so when I went and I tried to like manually override my model, I just didn't find anywhere that I felt comfortable. And so I left them at the models 1-16.
Hmm.
Okay, so next up, James, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars, and these guys are coming off of a pretty successful season. Doug Peterson's first year there really turned them around with Trevor Lawrence and company. Looking at their roster, they made some changes at running back. They drafted Tank Bigsby in the third round. He's going to help back up ETN. They also signed Dearness Johnson, who I really like. Dearness Johnson, when he got his time in Cleveland, he was legit. And so Jacksonville has a very deep running back room now, which is good. At wide receiver, they lost Marvin Jones, but it's not really the end of the world because Calvin Ridley came off of his suspension with the league and he's ready to roll. And everything I'm hearing about him sounds like he's looking pretty darn good. So that's good. At tight end, they kept Evan Ingram around, which was good. He fit in really well with that offense. They also went out and they drafted Brenton Strange in the second round, and so they're adding some depth there at tight end, which is nice. On the offensive line, they lost Jawan Taylor. He signed with the Chiefs. Um, which, I'll tell you what, man, for as much news as that got, lineups only has Taylor as a 70. And so I thought he way outplayed that rating. But either way, Jacksonville drafted Anton Harrison in the first round, and so that hopefully mitigates that loss. Um, on the defensive line, Corey Peters is out. They brought in Dwayne Smoot. That's kind of a wash. I probably like Peters a little bit more, but lineups has them both at a 74. On the edge, Arden Key and Dwayne Smoot, he was originally cut and then they brought him back. So I had him on my cut list also, James. But and then at cornerback, Shaq Griffin is out, and so looking at their roster top to bottom, I think that they need help potentially at right tackle. It's going to depend on how quickly can Anton Harrison get up to speed. I think they could use some help at defensive tackle. They've got some guys on the defensive line, just not very highly rated. And then at safety, I think that's another position where it might be a little bit of a weak spot for them this year. But all in all, I think Jacksonville's roster is looking a lot better than it has in a long time.
Yeah, I think their roster's looking a lot better. I think based on them winning the South last year, they have the hardest schedule in the South because they play the other because so they play Kansas City, Buffalo, along with the AFC North. Um, so with them, Like they have like a brutal stretch coming out of their bye. Like division games are always tough games, and so they play their bye's week 9. They play San Francisco, Tennessee, Houston, Cincinnati, at Cleveland, Baltimore,
Yeah, they've got a tough schedule.
and so and the with them, I had them at 9 and 8, and a lot of it's based on the schedule, and I really wanted to see them add some more pieces.
Hmm.
And I was projecting that like they would get like a piece here or there to get an extra win. But actually, I think without adding some pieces, I thought they maybe should consider. I actually dropped them down to 8 and 9, and winning the division at 8 and 9.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so you still got them winning the division there. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, and so I mean, not like crazy interesting, but yeah. So I had them originally higher up. I had them at 12-5 in my super early, and just also keeping in mind for anybody who's watching, they did finish 9-8 last year, and so I think a lot of people are hopeful that they're going to get into double-digit wins this year. But like James is saying, the schedule is tough, and they didn't really boost the roster that significantly to offset some of the headwinds of the schedule. When I factor all of this information into my new model, I've got them coming down to 9-8. And so with you at 8-9, me at 9-8, we're a lot more aligned here on Jacksonville. And I have them winning the South at 9-8. So we both got them winning the division here. Okay, so that takes us to the Titans, the last team in the South. And so for Tennessee at quarterback, Ryan Tannehill coming back. They're going to run it back with him at least one more time. But they did go out and draft Will Levis in the second round. And so it looks like either him or maybe Malik Willis if he develops, because I've been hearing some actually really good things about him this offseason. One of those guys could potentially be the quarterback of the future there. At running back, Derrick Henry, he's the man. We know that. They did go and draft Tyjae Spears in the third round, give him a little bit of depth there. At wide receiver, Robert Woods is out, but he was pretty ineffective for him last year anyhow. The big thing is that they signed DeAndre Hopkins, and the early reviews on him are looking pretty awesome. So that would be a huge boost for this team. At tight end, they lost Austin Hooper. I don't think they really used him very well last year, but this is a team that historically has leaned on multiple tight ends in any given season. And so that's something I'm a little bit concerned about. On the offensive line, a lot of guys are gone. Taylor Lewan, Nate Davis, Ben Jones. They did bring in Andre Dillard, and they drafted Peter Skoronski in round one. And so um, I don't I don't think the offensive line is going to be worse because of the three names I mentioned that left. All of them had injury issues and other things going on last year. But it's still, I do still think they need to beef up that offensive line a little bit more. Skoronski's a move in the right direction, but they could use a little bit more help. At defensive line, they brought in Arden Key. Hopefully, Vrabel will be able to get some pass rush out of that guy. Didn't really happen the way they wanted it to in Jacksonville, but it is what it is. Bud Dupree's gone on the edge. At linebacker, Zach Cunningham's gone. David Long is gone. They brought in Aziz El-Shair. I think that was a really quality signing, by the way. And then at cornerback, they lost Terrence Mitchell. They signed Sean Murphy Bunting. Central Michigan Fire Up Chips. I think Murphy Bunting is a very good fit for that team, and they need him. I think it's going to work out well for him. And then I don't know. At safety, Andrew Adams is out, and at kicker, Randy Bullock's out. So it's tough with Tennessee because at quarterback, it's like which version of Tannehill are we going to get? Are we going to get the Tannehill from last year or the Tannehill from a couple years ago? If you get the guy from a couple years ago, I think it could bode well for Tennessee, especially with them having DeAndre Hopkins in the mix. But if we're getting last year's Tannehill, quarterback is definitely a weak spot on this roster because there are other guys there likely need time to develop. Tight end, I think that they'll find a way to get production out of no-name guys, which they've been able to do, but it would have helped to go out and get a guy that maybe had, you know, like some known prospects, and they did not do that. As I mentioned, the offensive line is a concern. Derrick Henry's just going to run it down the defense's throat, but you give him some lanes, he's obviously going to be way more effective. Defensive end, that continues to be a sore spot for Tennessee. They just can't seem to lock down guys on that defensive end or that edge spot. Cornerback, even with Murphy Bunting coming in, I think they need a true cornerback one, and I'm just not seeing it. And then this is a team that's been snake bitten by the kicker. And so, their lack of going out and making a move at kicker has me wondering what's going on. And I mean, we'll just go back like 2 seasons ago. They were losing games because of the kicker. And so I'm just surprised that wasn't addressed. And so, Tennessee, for as much as we love Mike Vrabel and as much as he's coached the heck out of them, we've talked about it a couple years in a row now. The roster is a mess in Tennessee, and he's going to have to work his butt off if he wants any freaking hope in heck of getting them into the playoffs.
So, with Tennessee, if they have another quirky schedule. 5 of their last 8 games are division games.
So theirs is all at the end. Yeah.
They play at Indianapolis in week 5, and then they don't play another division game until week 11.
Okay.
So the league kind of did them favors for within the division by putting all their division games at the end of the season after whoever their quarterback situation is settled, and well, it was before the Hopkins news, but their wide receivers, like their team's kind of settling in, but possibly by week 11, if things are going south, I hate to say this, but I think they could fire Vrabel.
It could happen, and the sad part about it is that Vrabel has been a phenomenal coach for them. They're just basically shitting on him with the roster moves, man.
Yeah, and they always outperform the roster. Like paper-wise, this team it's like a 5-win team, and they always outperform it. If you remember last year, the only reason they didn't win the division was because Jacksonville went on a tear and won 5 of the last 6 games of the year to win the divisions, and that's what had to happen. Yeah. And it came down to that one Saturday night game at Jacksonville where Tennessee wasn't able to get it done. So the last game of the year is at Jacksonville. It's Jacksonville at home this year. But I think by then, Tennessee's already eliminated from the playoffs.
Okay. Yeah, so you had them at 7-10 and you're super early. Where are you at with these guys now?
I dropped them down by a game. And you would think because of the Hopkins addition that I would increase it. Mm-hmm. But I don't have any faith in Tannehill being able to get Hopkins the ball.
Okay. All right, so yeah, you dropped them down a game, and they finished 7-10 last year, and so you're thinking they take a step back. I had them at 7-10 in my super early, and see, this is where it gets interesting. So with the Hopkins move and all the other adjustments that I've made over the last 2 months or whatever it's been since we did the super early, I've actually got Tennessee creeping up to 9-8, and.
Wow.
That my model has Vrabel as one of the higher rated coaches, which always helps. But I think the Hopkins thing was a factor too. But it's a suspect 9-8, that's for sure. And I still have Jacksonville beating them out on the tiebreaker anyhow. Mm-hmm. I could easily see it being less. I would hope it ends up being more because I like Vrabel. But and hey, if he got fired, he's going to have options. Somebody's going to want him for everything he's done with that team.
This is true.
Okay, let's take it on over to the NFC South here, James. And so the first team we got on the list is the Atlanta Falcons. And At quarterback, Marcus Mariota's out. They brought in Taylor Heineke, but the expectation is that Desmond Ridder is going to be the man. And so Ritter's going into year two. Um, you know, one thing that I noticed about Ridder, and this was actually playing Madden, he has got some serious speed for a quarterback, and not many people ever talk about that with him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that's something to watch because Arthur Smith is going to want to run the ball, and I can see him getting very creative with designed quarterback run plays with the kind of speed that Ritter has. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out in the field. But otherwise, at running back, they brought in Bijan Robinson in the draft in the first round. That was a huge move. Everybody was expecting that to be a high pick, and um, he's expected to be a workhorse, and that's with them having Algier on the roster, who was a surprise pick last year, and Cordero Patterson, and so they're looking really strong at running back going into this year. At wide receiver, they lost Demir Bird. They brought in Mac Hollins and Scotty Miller. Not great. They do still have Drake London, so that helps. At tight end, Anthony Firkser and Michael Pruitt are out, but they weren't doing much. They did bring in Jonnu Smith, and so they're pairing him with Kyle Pitts. I think you were talking about it. Maybe this is like a sign that Pitts is going to go more to like a slot wide receiver role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that'd be appropriate when you look at the guys they've got on that team now. On the offensive line, Elijah Wilkinson's out, Colby Gossip's out. They did bring in Jermaine Ifedi, and they they drafted Matthew Bergeron in the second round. Um, in terms of like the immediate impact, it's probably a wash, and I think long term it's going to be better because of the ceiling on Bergeron. On the defensive line, this is one where a lot of people are excited. They brought in Calais Campbell. I know he's getting long in the tooth, but I think he still adds a lot of value to that defensive line. They also signed David Onyemata, and they drafted at the edge position Zach Harrison in the third round. And so they're making moves there on the defensive front, which they've historically had problems with. At linebacker, Rashaan Evans is out, which lineups has him at an 84. I don't know he's ever lived up to that 84, but whatever. They did sign Caden Ellis and Bud Dupree. Dupree, they're needing him to be effective this year, and he's had a couple rough years now, but that's injury related and other stuff. At cornerback, Rashad Fenton, Mike Ford, Isaiah Oliver, they're out. They brought in Mike Hughes and Jeff Okudah. Okuda's already hurt. Man, the Lions retreads, this is one where we've seen both these guys firsthand, especially Okudah, and, he was a high first round pick. Maybe him going there without all the pressure and the expectations, maybe he can turn it around. But they're not asking him to be a one, and so that's fine. And then same with Mike Hughes. Mike Hughes has been up and down in his career. So I don't know. I think maybe it helps them overall, but that's only because they weren't very good there to begin with. And then at safety, Eric Harris is out, but they signed Jesse Bates. That was a huge freaking signing, in my opinion. And then at punter, they added Bradley Pinion. And so I think, roster top to bottom, quarterback is a to be determined. Ritter, we don't really know what they have in him yet. And so I don't know that I can call it a weak spot just yet. I think that the confidence that Arthur Smith has in him leads me to believe that he's a lot better than people are thinking, and that athletic ability, I think, means there's some hope there. And so I don't want to call quarterback a weak spot, but like I said, to be determined. Linebacker is an area they need help with, and I do think even though they brought in Bradley Pinion, I think they could have a better punter. But that's me just kind of being picky. And so all in all, Atlanta, their roster, it's looking better than last year. What are you seeing and what are you thinking with these guys, James?
Atlanta's one of my favorite teams coming into this year.
Okay.
They have a semi-easy schedule where they play the AFC South and the NFC North. And like their hardest road games are probably at Detroit and at the Jets.
Yeah. Yeah. If those are their two hardest, that's
Yeah.
encouraging for
I'm sorry,
them.
their hardest non-division road games.
Okay.
So when I look at the moves they make, I really like the addition of Bijan Robinson. I absolutely love that draft pick. I love his fit in there. You might argue with the head quarterback Patterson, but Bijan Robinson's just a stud.
Yeah. You couldn't
And
pass on him,
you can't pass on him.
especially for a head coach that's had Derrick Henry in the past. You know,
Exactly.
I mean, you're giving the guy the best you can give him.
Yeah. So in our super early predictions, I had them at 10-7.
Yep.
I now have them at 13-4.
Oh, man, you're getting real hyped on them.
Yeah, which scares the hell out of me. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
it's
and they
just
finished 7-10 last year. So
mhm.
you think Ritter's the real deal?
I do. I like what I saw out of Ritter, especially getting the last four starts of the season last year. It propels him into being comfortable in that starting role, and they kind of have a couple easier games to start the season where they play Carolina and Green Bay, both games at home
Yeah.
for Ritter, and it's like it's like their first six game. I'm sorry, their first eight games they play two home, two away, two home, two away, and then it alternates until like the end of the season. Like it's that's crazy. That's weird. I just noticed that, but yeah. So I really like Atlanta coming this year. Like I think they might lose to like Jacksonville and Tennessee. They'll probably lose to Detroit, and Carolina might pick them off when they're at Carolina.
Okay.
Outside of that, I don't see that many losses on the schedule.
Yeah, I think you know, even if they got to the 10-7 where you had them in the super early, that'd be a successful season for them. But if they got to 13-4, of course, that's putting them at another level, which would be huge. So yeah, and they finished 7-10 last year. I had them at 9-8 in my super early, and this one is a weird one for me because um, I ended up with all the updates. They came down to 8-9, and 8-9 was still good for them to take second in the division and sneak into the wild card for the NFC. And so, um, you know, I still like their prospects. And what I'll tell you with Atlanta is that Ritter's really the key factor in my model. And so I've got
Mm-hmm.
him at 8-9 with a really low rating. If I give him a modest boost, it puts him at 11 wins in my model. And so if he ends up being, you know, better than expected, I can see getting closer to where you're at with the 13-4. But I'm going to stick with the 8-9 until I really get to see what he's going to do this year. And then, you know, of course, we adjust as the season goes on. So, okay. So next up, James, we've got the Carolina Panthers. We've been talking about them a lot. You know, as we know, they brought in Bryce Young, number one overall pick. They also brought in Andy Dalton to back him up and hopefully help coach him from the sideline with the clipboard. At running back, they lost Deonta Foreman, who was very effective for them last year after they traded away McCaffrey. But they brought in Miles Sanders, which on paper is a pretty significant upgrade. You know me, I'm a big Foreman fan. I
Mm-hmm.
liked him. I liked his running style. Sanders, I think, has always kind of just been a little bit of a letdown. But now that he's out of Philly, you know, I think that you adjust your expectations of him, and you know, we'll see what we're going to get there. At wide receiver, DJ Moore was part of that trade to Chicago. They did bring in Adam Thielen, DJ Shark, and Demir Bird. They also drafted Jonathan Mingo in the second round. And so I like that they're trying at wide receiver, but I really would like to see them have a wide receiver one. And we know it's not Thielen at this stage of his career, The other guys on the list, they've not shown that. Maybe Mingo in time, but I'm not seeing him jumping out the gate doing it. At tight end, though, they did bring in Hayden Hurst. I liked that move a lot. He's got an 81 rating on lineups. He was a third down specialist in Cincinnati, and I think he's that safety net for Bryce Young that we talked about with the rookie quarterback. On the defensive line, Henry Anderson's out. They brought in Shy Tuttle and Deshaun Williams. Nothing spectacular there. But they drafted DJ Johnson for the edge position in the third round. I like that. At linebacker, Damian Wilson and Corey Littleton are out. They brought in Camu Grugier-Hill. However you say his name. Holy cow, I'm botching him bad tonight. Cornerback, TJ Carey's out. They didn't really backfill him. At safety, they made some good moves. They brought in Von Bell and Eric Rowe. I like them bringing in both those guys there. At kicker, Zane Gonzalez is out, but I think he was hurt a lot last year and wasn't really doing a whole heck of a lot. So for them, roster-wise, I think quarterback, it's all about development for Bryce Young, but they've got their quarterback of the future, and that wide receiver one is an area that they need to figure out. And, it doesn't look like it's going to be this year unless one of these guys just kind of steps up that we're not expecting. Aside from that, James, I actually think Carolina's roster is pretty solid. And that's a lot better than a lot of the teams I've talked about so far tonight. What are you thinking, man?
I really, really wish Carolina did more.
Okay. Where do you think they could have done more?
Well, first of all, I hate substituting Miles Sanders for Donta Foreman. I'm sorry, vice versa. Donta Foreman for, you know what I mean. Miles Sanders, yeah, I was right the first time. Miles Sanders for Donta Foreman. I think they have, looking at them, I think they have a decently difficult schedule. I think their offensive line isn't quite there. They spent the last couple of years up until this year, like they did some offensive moves, but like last year, all they did was defense.
Yep.
And I don't think they have the protection in place for that offensive line to protect. Why am I drawing? Huh? Yeah, Bryce Young. Thank you. I don't know why I'm getting those two confused. Like Bryce Young and CJ Stroud all the time. Yeah. Every time I go to talk about them. But I don't think they've done enough.
Okay.
And I was really disappointed in this offseason because, as you know, I was higher on Carolina than you were at our super early prediction. I think you had them at like 4 or 5 wins, and I had them at 9.
Yeah.
I now have them at. I only dropped them down to 7 wins, but that's also because they have on the schedule. They have a lot of teams that I think are going to take a step back.
Okay.
This year, like they play Dallas, and I'm not too high on Dallas in that game because it's at home. They play, but like I'm sorry, they have them losing to Dallas. My fault. I missed a line. They play at Chicago. That's an easy win. They play. I think Tampa Bay's down. I think Indy's down. I think Seattle. I think Seattle overachieved last year. So I have them at 7 wins, but I could easily see them at 3.
Okay. Yeah. So you think there's more downward pressure for them than upside this year. I gotcha. Yeah, and so they finished 7-10 last year. I had them in the super early at 4-13. My model has them at 5-12, and so even though I'm talking them up, my model is still saying it's going to be an uphill battle for this year. And a lot of that's it's in ways similar to Atlanta, where it's going to depend on Bryce Young's rating and how quick he develops. The thing is, I'm more comfortable boosting the rating for Ritter because he's going into year two. I'm not comfortable boosting that rating for
Hmm.
Bryce Young because he's a rookie. And so I think he's going to have rookie struggles. And so I'm sticking with the 5-12, even though I really do like their roster. Okay, so next up, James, that takes us down to the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans. And so the Saints, their big move of the offseason was bringing in Derek Carr. That was an interesting one, the way it worked out in the possible trade and, all that. I
Oh,
know you
I
got a
like
kick
the
out of that.
I like the fuck you, David. Derek Carr gave the Raiders like, fuck you. You want to get rid of me? Nope, I won't waive my no trade. I'll go sign with them out in the off season.
Yeah, that was a bold move, and he got there. But yeah, so Andy Dalton's out. They've got Derek Carr. They still got Jameis Winston in the mix, but Carr's the guy. At running back, Mark Ingram is gone. David Johnson's gone, who I didn't even realize David Johnson was on the roster last year until I was looking at this. But um,
I guess I
Jamal
do
Williams,
remember that.
what's that?
I do remember him being there. Like I think he only played like 5 games there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he was phenomenal for a brief time in Houston, and then it just like never worked out for him otherwise, but that's okay. So at running back, they brought in Jamal Williams. I like that, but he's kind of like a specialist. He's a hammer at this point. And they drafted Kendre Miller in round three, and so I think they're going to be better at running back. But Kamara's got that 3-game suspension. At wide receiver, Jarvis Landry is gone. Deontay Hardy's gone. Landry was fairly ineffective for him last year. They did bring in Brian Edwards. I like him, even though he's never lived up to expectations. And I think the big story there is that Chris Olave was great as a rookie. They're expecting him to be even better this year. And whether you believe it or not, Michael Thomas is the healthiest he's been in, you know, 3, 4, 57 years because he hasn't been healthy in forever. So then at tight end, they brought back Jimmy Graham, a little bit long in the tooth, and I don't think he's going to be their top tight end, but he definitely adds some depth for them, which is nice. They added Trey Turner to the offensive line. That's good for depth. On the defensive line, David Onyemata's out. They brought in Kalen Saunders and Nathan Shepard. They also drafted Brian Breesy in the first round. I like Kalen Saunders. I think that was a sneaky good signing, even though lineups only has him rated at a 71. On the edge, they lost Marcus Davenport. That one, that hurts. Even though Davenport was like very streaky, inconsistent with them, they did draft Isaiah Foskey in the second round, and so I think they're hopeful that in time he'll be able to fill those shoes. But I think it's going to take a little while. In the secondary, Chris Harris is gone. Chris Harris Jr. Sorry. They did bring in Isaac Yiadom. And then at safety, P.J. Williams, Justin Evans, Daniel Sorensen, they're all gone. They added Daniel Abram. Everything I'm hearing, even though on paper they've had a lot of subtractions in the secondary, they still feel pretty confident that they've got a stacked secondary. And so New Orleans is a team that historically has invested a lot in their cornerbacks and their safeties. And so I'm not like totally worried about them. And so looking at their roster, top to bottom, I think they have a gap at defensive tackle. I think that they could add one more quality guy on the inside of that defensive line. And then really, I think the rest of it's all going to come down to, what kind of Derek Carr are we going to get with the Saints? Is he going to be, higher performing Derek Carr, or is he going to be streaky Derek Carr? We've seen Derek Carr in the past where he's had seasons where he's been effective 20 to 20, but he can't get the ball in the end zone. And so, I'm curious to see what we're getting. We know he's going to be motivated. He's happy to be signing with the Saints. He's got the connection with Dennis Allen. He's got the weapons. He's got the offensive line. I think it looks good for them. It's just maybe a little bit of an unknown. What are you thinking, James?
All right. First, David Johnson um, played in the last 5 games in the year last year for New Orleans, and he
Okay.
had 12 total attempts for 24 yards and 4 receptions for 47 yards.
Okay.
So not very much of a factor, but as we kind of figured, just based on how his career record had.
Yeah, I thought he faded away a few years ago.
Yeah. So with the Saints, I was fading them early in the season. With I was thinking that Kamara was going to be suspended 6 to 8 games,
Okay.
and with that, I was fading them early in the season. I had them at 8 and 9 and are super early because I thought the suspension was going to be longer. Fast forward to today, and it's only a 3 game suspension. So the 3 game suspension, he's going to miss home against Tennessee, at Carolina, and at Green Bay.
Okay.
I think without him in those games,
Yeah, those are all
it's
winnable games even without him.
exactly. I thought it was more a little bit later, like if it was 8, like missing at. I mean, it's so winnable, but like Tampa Bay, New England, Houston, Jacksonville, Indy, like so I had them losing in there a little bit.
Okay.
I now have them. I absolutely love them coming into this year. I don't have them winning the division. That's another team. We'll
Okay.
get to that team later. I'm kidding. We've already talked about that team. But I have them making the playoffs at 10-7.
Okay. All right. Um, all right. So yeah, last year they were 7-10. You had them at 8-9 super early, and now you've got them moving up to 10-7. Okay. I had them at 8-9 also in the super early, and I bumped them up to 9-8. So we're both moving them up. You a little bit more than me, but we're still pretty close at 9-10. I've got them winning the division though, and so you and me were flipped with Atlanta. I have both these teams making the playoffs. I've just got it the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that takes us to our final team for the evening, which is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we teased a little bit about these guys last week that there's a lot going on with this team, and Baker Mayfield in particular. And so let's just get into it here. We've got at quarterback Tom Brady. He's out. He retired. They brought in Baker Mayfield. He is in a quarterback competition with Kyle Trask. Um, you know, there's a lot of hype for Mayfield, but I also occasionally hear that like the gap is closing between the two of them, and so it's hard to trust what you hear at this time of the year sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
At running back, Giovanni Bernard is out, Leonard Fournette is out. They brought in Chase Edmonds, but the expectation is that holy cow, I forget what's his name. Was on the roster last year. One of their, I think he was a rookie last year, is expected to be their starter this year, and so not expect
Yeah.
not expected to be a downgrade at running back is ultimately what I'm trying to say. At wide receiver, they lost Scotty Miller, Julio Jones, and Brashad Perriman, but all those guys were backups to Godwin and Mike Evans. At tight end, Cameron Brate and Kyle Rudolph are out, but they weren't add much value last year anyhow. On the offensive line, they lost Donovan Smith and Shaq Mason. They did sign Matt Feeler, and they drafted Cody Mauch in the second round. Um, I am a little bit nervous about that because their offensive line was just so bad last year. I think that it can only be better this year because some guys are going to have that extra year to develop, and some other guys are going to be healthier, and whatever the case may be. But that's an area to watch. On the defensive line, Akeem Hicks is out, Raheem Nunez Roches is out. They signed Greg Gaines, and then they doubled down in the draft with Kalijah Cansey in the first round and Yaya Diaby in the third round. And so I like what they did there. On the edge, Carl Nassib, he's out. At cornerback, Sean Murphy Bunting is out. They may be one of the deepest teams in the secondary, so I don't think they're worried about Murphy Bunting being gone. He fell out of favor last year anyhow and was like not on the field as much as in previous years. At safety, Mike Edwards, Keanu Neal, and Logan Ryan are all out. They did add Ryan Neal. Um, Despite these departures, I don't think that they're worried about the secondary. And then at kicker, Ryan Sukup's out. They added Chase McLaughlin and Rodrigo Blankenship. One of those two guys will probably be serviceable, but they could do better at kicker. And so I think quarterback's a big question mark for Tampa Bay. I think running back, just because you got a young guy who we haven't seen a whole lot of yet, that's a little bit of a question mark, but not as big a one. Tight end, they could do more, but they do have two really great wide receivers. I think they need help at guard, even though Mouch could step up in year one and be effective there, and then kicker. And so I think Tampa Bay has more holes than we've seen in a long time, but they do still also have a lot of talent. In the positions that they have talent at, they have really high quality talent. And so that makes Tampa Bay a very hard team to project for this year. And so what do you see and what are you thinking with these guys, James?
So first of all, the running back you were referring to was Rashad White.
Thank you.
So Tampa Bay. I absolutely hate Tampa Bay coming into this year. You can remember they won the South last year, so they have all the number one. So they have at Minnesota. Well, they play the NFC North, so they play at Minnesota, but they have to play Philadelphia and San Francisco.
Okay.
And it's at San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I have them winning 0 games before week 9.
Holy cow.
Then I have them winning back-to-back. Then I have them losing. Then I have them winning. And then I have them winning 0 more games.
Okay.
I have them beating Houston, Tennessee, and Indianapolis.
Okay.
Not even beating Jacksonville. Just Houston,
gotcha.
Tennessee, and Indianapolis.
Okay.
I think Bulls gets fired going into the bye in week 5. I think it's just going to be
happen,
that bad.
man. It could happen.
So they start the season at Minnesota. They play at Minnesota, home for Chicago and Philadelphia, and then at New Orleans. If they start out 0-4, I think they fire him.
Okay.
But coming out of the bye, they play Detroit, Atlanta, at Buffalo. So that's not exactly projected to be an easy time coming out of the bye. And their game, they're playing at San Francisco. They play. It's just, I have them winning 3 games this year. It's a tough schedule. I have them going 3-14. And while I like Bulls as a coach, I think the pieces aren't there in Tampa Bay for him to be successful.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, because it didn't work out with the Jets. And I like him. I like hearing him talk. I think the players like him, and they think he's like more of a stoic kind of personality, but still a strong leader. I just wonder if he's really head coach material. It just seems like he's more top tier defensive coordinator. It's like something's missing at the head coach spot for him. So
I think you might be right there.
All right, so you had him at 4-13 in the super early. You got him coming down to 3-14. I had him at 5-12 in the super early, and also good to point out they were 8-9 last year. But I think we're in like a whole new world with Tampa Bay this year without Tom Brady. My model has them at 6-11 for this year, James, and so it went up a game. And this is where it gets wild in my model, is that Baker Mayfield's rating, it affects my model so drastically that if I boost him up, and I had him at a healthy boost when there was all the hype about him and how well he was doing. my model had them winning 12 freaking games. A lot of them were very close, but I just don't see that being a reality. And it kind of freaks me out a little bit because um, that's kind of how my model had the Lions last year. It had a huge range for
Mhm.
them, and it just made it very hard to kind of nail down what I thought was appropriate. For these guys, I think you hit the nail on the head is that it's, Baker really hasn't gotten it done. And so I can't give him the rating that I had him at that had the 12. And then same with Todd Bowles. It just, whatever it is, it has not worked for him. And so I have to err on the lower end, which is the 6 wins in my model. And so that's what I'm going with for this team, man.
Makes sense to me.
All right, so then I guess top to bottom, you've got Atlanta winning the division, then you got the Saints, then you got Carolina, and then you've got Tampa Bay.
Hmm.
So I've got New Orleans, Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Carolina. So we've kind of got our top two and bottom two the same, just flipped. So okay, not too bad, not too bad. That is the NFC South, and yeah, I guess any closing thoughts on that before we move over to question of the week here, James?
I think so. I think that's it.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, let's do a little question of the week action. And so for tonight, I wanted to talk about the NFL Top 100 list. Every year, as you know, James, the players vote on who they think are the top 100 players in the NFL. And, NFL.com basically releases like 10 a week, starting at 100 and going down and whatever else. And so the full 100 is out now. And I just wanted you to give me your opinion when you're looking at the top 10. Do you think any player or players got snubbed by the ratings for this year? And so when I look at it in here, I guess let me just pull it up real quick so we can talk about who's in that top 10. Oh, I just botched the crap out of that. All right, so you've got Patrick Mahomes at 1. I don't think there's any surprise there. You've got Justin Jefferson at 2, Jalen Hurts at 3, Nick Bosa 4, Travis Kelce 5, Joe Burrow 6, Tyreek Hill 7, Josh Allen 8, Micah Parsons 9, and Chris Jones 10. And so all these guys, rock solid players, top of their game. Um, for me, I'm going to say if a player was snubbed, and I'm saying if, emphasizing the if, it would have been Myles Garrett. And I say that because Myles Garrett was number 11 on last year's list, and he arguably had a better year individually. He tied his sack mark. I think he had more pressures. He had more tackles for a loss. Uh, but he ended up falling to 20 on the players list here. He went from 11 to 20. And I think some of that might have to do with basically it's like, the sympathy of the team struggling maybe brought him down in the players' minds a little bit because Myles Garrett is a phenomenal player, a phenomenal defensive end. And I would have thought with another strong year like he had last year, that might have bumped him up at least one spot to get him into that top 10. Instead, he fell down 9 spots. And so, you know, and I think you could argue with a number of guys that maybe they could have been in that top 10, like Trent Williams at left tackle. I think he's a guy you could maybe make the case for. Even Fred Warner at middle linebacker, I think you could make the case for him. But all in all, I mean, I think it is a pretty rock solid top 10. And so I think it's almost like you really got to make a case for a guy and who would you bump at that point, which I think it would be hard to bump. I think maybe you bump Chris Jones at 10, but Chris Jones really is coming off a very strong year too. So it's a hard argument in my opinion, man. What do you think?
All right. I'm not getting into the order of them. I
Sure.
think I agree with 8 of the 10 players in the top 10.
Okay.
The ones I disagree with are Micah Parsons and Tyreek Hill.
Okay.
I think there were 3 players that were snubbed that could make big arguments. Your Myles Garrett argument is a valid one. When I look at the top 10, or when I look at the top 20, oh, wait a minute. When I look at the top 30, is he here? Hold on, I'm still looking for him.
Oh, you got a guy that really got snubbed, is what you're telling me.
Where the fuck is he ranked? Hold on, let me look at the top 40. Am I just... He's ranked number fucking 39.
Brock Purdy, yeah.
Jamar Chase.
See, I don't know. I think I would still have Tyreek Hill over him on my list. But I think he should be a lot higher than, what'd you say, 39 or 38?
39.
Yeah, I think he should be higher than 39.
Also, Derrick Henry, where did I just saw Derrick Henry? Derrick
Yeah.
Henry at 25?
Yeah, and I mean, he had like 1,500 something yards last year, man.
Yes. With
I
13
think
touchdowns.
I think he's another one that's like in that Myles Garrett vein where people discounted him because the team struggled last year. Because when you look at his individual performance, last year was like a vintage Derrick Henry year, man. He just ran all over everybody.
Yeah, just outside of the top 10, Josh Jacobs and Devonta Adams. Like, they have arguments to be in the top 10 too.
True, true. Yeah, Josh Jacobs is a tough one for me. He had such a great year, but it was like almost like a 1 year wonder kind of thing that it makes me suspect to, dub him a top tenner,
But 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 when you look at Jacobs' stats, and okay, it's top 10 players coming into the year. It's
Correct.
not
Yeah.
top 10.
Yeah.
It's like his previous stats. But even when you look at his stats, they've been steadily increasing over the last couple years.
Yeah, I'm not saying I don't like the guy.
So he had like he was right around 1,000 yards. He took a little dip, and then he broke out with 1,600 yards. But it's just he has the arguments. It's like I can't believe how like fucking Jamar Chase is below Khalil Mack.
Yeah, I mean, in Khalil Mack, I mean, it's like he's in decline phase, is what it looks like.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a
Then
tough
you have
one.
you have Christian McCaffrey at 35.
Yeah, see, the Khalil Mack thing, that's where it's like you got the legacy kicking in, is that the players are looking more than just the 1 year, And so it's like even though they're trying to say it's just the top going into this season, it's hard to not have history affect your opinion.
Okay. Then what's your excuse for Dexter Lawrence being at 28?
I'm not giving you excuses. I'm just trying to help you maybe understand where people's heads could be at, man.
Like it's just this list this year this is the first year that this list completely bugs me.
Okay.
Like completely bugs me.
Geez, man, because like last year we had a whole show on this. Let's see. Do we have a week between season and when we wrap up? Let's see. Next week we're doing
We
this.
might, yeah, because
Yeah, we're gonna have 1 week.
1 week.
We're gonna have 1 week. All right. So the last week before the regular season, James, we'll just write it down now. We're gonna do our review of the NFL Top 100 list. And that'll
Yeah,
give us
because
plenty of time to come up with who we think needs to go into what tiers, you know?
yeah, it's just this list bugs the fuck out of me.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the last time when we reviewed it, you and I, we had a lot of bones to pick. And so I suspect it would be the same. It's just, yeah, let's give it the time to go through the full exercise. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I haven't even reviewed like the entire list. Like I'm just like looking at it and
You're not digging it
how
at
the
all, man.
how the fuck is Joey Bosa number 70?
Yeah, how much did he even play last year? I think he's phenomenal if he's healthy.
Yeah, he's phenomenal if he's healthy, but it's just
Well, I didn't mean to give you so much grief. Let's just focus on, hey, we had a whole bunch of new subscribers and Gridiron Grinder. Hey, if you're watching, hit that like button. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We do it every week, people.
this is just ridiculous. These players were smoking crack when they.
Well, I mean, hey,
How the fuck is
if
how
Bashaud
does
Breeland was a part of it,
Devonta Smith number 100?
he had a solid year, you know. So some of it, some of it for me is that I like to look at it by position, you know. So it's like in addition to looking at the overall 100, I like to see like what's the order of the positions, like what wide receivers are rated where, and then say, oh man, they should have had this receiver rated higher than that one, and this one rated higher than that one. But um, I like Devonta Smith's season. I guess I got to look at it in relation to some of the other players to decide if he should have made the list or not, you know?
All right, so I'll
And,
go
and,
with
is, and is that your argument? Is that you don't think he should have been in the top 100?
no. I think he's fucking too low.
Or you think okay, so you think he should have been a lot better than 100?
Yeah, like just looking at like Terry McLaurin,
Yep.
who was a number one in Washington,
Yeah.
had 1,191 yards, ranked at number 94. Devonta Smith, as the number two in Philadelphia, had 1,196 yards, 95 receptions versus 80. Uh, Devonta Smith had 7 touchdowns. McLaurin
All
does
right.
not say how many touchdowns he had.
Yeah, with McLaurin, though, I think one thing you want to keep in mind is that he had like nobody throwing to him. And he hasn't in his career like really had anybody throwing to him. And he's still productive, you know? And so it's like, how good would he be if he had a better quarterback? So I think maybe the players are throwing him some props based on that.
Yeah, as I was saying, McLaurin's a bad example.
Okay, okay.
I just had those two on the same page. So
Sure.
I will go with Garrett Wilson,
Yeah, a rookie. A rookie.
rookie, 1,100 yards.
That's a lot for a rookie.
At 74, Devonta Smith at 100.
Yeah, that one I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that one. I like Devonta
Mark
Smith.
Andrews at 80, Devonta Smith at 100.
Hmm. All right, well save it. Save it for a couple weeks. We're gonna dig into it, James.
St. Brown at 67, Devonta Smith at 100.
Or just keep going through it now.
Nope. I will cut it off there. My point is this list is a fucking joke. And I will get more into that in 3 weeks.
Sure. You think that they just had a big party and just threw a bunch of names in a hat?
I think they did.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, hey, so for tonight, man, that's all I got. Do you have any closing thoughts since you're going to be saving this part for later?
No, I'm just looking at this list more and more and getting more and more annoyed at it. Cooper Kupp at 47.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a tough one because he was hurt last year. So, um, I don't know. But he was phenomenal until he got hurt and that team fell apart.
Yeah.
So.
So, anyways, I will get more into this.
Yeah, I might just sit back for that episode and just let you do the talking.
It just bugs the fuck out of me.
Yeah, I can tell you're feeling very passionate about it. So I'm going to let you probably do the heavy lifting for that show. All right, well, hey, so for tonight, we're good.
Yeah,
Everybody, thanks for watching. Next week, we're doing the AFC and the NFC West. And so we're going to continue this on. And we hope you like the show. That's all we got. So we'll catch you later.
Sounds good. Have a good one.
Gridiron Grinder. Hut, hut, hike.